This episode is sponsored by Kinsta. Between juggling client meetings, managing your website, and keeping up with everyday tasks, who has the time to stress out about website security? Well, with Kinsta, the technical stuff is taken care of, so you can focus on what you do best. Kinsta provides managed hosting for WordPress, offering lightning-fast load times, top-tier security, and unmatched human-only customer support. Whether you're a business owner, web developer, or running a digital agency, Kinsta makes managing your website easy and efficient. Kinsta provides enterprise-grade security, being one of the few hosting providers for WordPress with SOC 2 and other certifications, guaranteeing the highest level of security for your website. Thanks to their unlimited free expert-led migrations, Kinsta ensures a smooth transition for you from other hosting providers. Customers have reported 200% faster load times post-migration to their platform. What I find cool about Kinsta is their fast and reliable customer service and premium features that are included at no extra cost. Ready to experience Kinsta's hosting for yourself? Get your first month free when you sign up at kinsta.com today. That's KINSTA.com. Today's episode is brought to you by RapidCloud. Did you know that 53% of users abandon a website that takes more than 3 seconds to load? For businesses relying on WordPress, every second counts for user experience, conversions, SEO rankings, and revenue. And that's where RapidCloud comes in. RapidCloud is a high-performance managed WordPress hosting solution with advanced technologies like Lightspeed Enterprise and Object Cache Pro designed to deliver lightning-fast load times and handle the demands of today's dynamic websites. Whether you're running an e-commerce store, online learning platform, or a bustling media site, RapidCloud ensures lightning-fast performance, unmatched scalability, and enterprise-grade security, all backed by 24/7 expert support. RapidCloud empowers developers, business owners, and agencies to deliver seamless online experiences without ever worrying about downtime or slow load times. Use the promo code CODESTORY to get up to 25% off on all annual plans and 10% off monthly subscriptions. Offer valid for 2 billing periods only. That's promo code CODESTORY, all one word. Visit www.rapid.cloud and get started today. That's RAPYD.cloud.
Our first mistake was focusing on only highlighting the risks. We believe so strongly that understanding the supply chain, understanding the risks in software were not being adequately addressed, and that by itself would be a tremendous contribution to the industry. And what we very quickly realized is that the industry is really overwhelmed. So they have many detecting risk from a variety of sources, and then making decisions off of this is becoming almost paralyzing. This is Nick Mistry, the Chief Information Security Officer at Lineage.
This is Code Story, a podcast bringing you interviews with tech visionaries.
I spent 6 months moonlighting.
There's nothing on the back end.
Who share what it takes to change an industry.
I don't exactly know what to
took
do next.
many goes to get right.
Who built the teams that have their
The
back.
company is its people.
The teams help each other achieve. I was proud of our team.
Keeping scalability top of mind.
All that infrastructure was
Yes, we've been fighting it as we grow.
Total waste of time. The stories you don't read in the headlines.
It's not an easy thing to achieve, mind
Took it
you.
off the shelf and dusted it off and tried it again.
To ride the ups and downs of the startup life.
You need to really want it. It's not just about technology.
All this and more on Code Story.
I'm your host, Noah Laphart, and today how Nick Mistry is leading the charge in building the first and only comprehensive software supply chain platform. This episode is sponsored by Speakeasy. Grow your API user adoption and improve engineering velocity with friction-free integration experiences. With Speakeasy's platform, you can now automatically generate SDKs in 10 languages and Terraform providers in minutes. Visit speakeasy.com/codestory and generate your first SDK for free. This message is sponsored by QA Wolf. QA Wolf gets engineering teams to 80% automated end-to-end test coverage and helps them ship 5 times faster by reducing QA cycles from hours to minutes. With over 100 5-star reviews on G2 and customer testimonials from SalesLoft, Drata, and AutoTrader, you're in good hands. Join the Wolfpack at QAWolf.com. Nick Mistry lives in the suburbs of Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C. He has always been fascinated by cybersecurity, but most of all, its intersection with emerging technology. Outside of tech, he enjoys reading about human nature through biographies of past leaders. He highly recommends the book Founding Brothers, which highlights the start of the U.S. He also enjoys spending time with his family outdoors, especially during the fall in the Northeast. Around the time of the Log4j exploit, Nick found himself troubled by the fact that people did not know if these exploits were included in their software. He spent months diving deep into the issue and talking with people in the industry, and eventually, he connected with a prior colleague working on this very concept. This is the creation story of Lineage.
Lineage is pronounced like the lineage of your software. And we're primarily focused on identifying and managing software supply chain risks, whether you're sourcing software, building software, buying software, or selling and deploying software. So our goal is really to solve the software supply chain security challenges comprehensively. We've come at it really on a fundamentally different view of how to address the supply chain risks, and primarily is making sure we understand and can identify the full lineage of your software, meaning every component and understanding all of its dependencies and transitive dependencies down to the nth level, right? That is incredibly important. Many of the tools do not provide you a full view, or they can be easily compromised to understand a full view of your supply chain. One of the first tasks we did is, how do we do that? And so we looked at other technologies and eventually built this concept called crawlers that basically will crawl your software, identify all its components, and then crawl its components. So let's say it's an open source package A. Going to open source package A, let's say it lives in Git, scanning the source code just like you would scan your own software, and then identifying risks within that software, but also identifying all of its dependencies, discovering all of its dependencies, capturing metadata and contributor data, any data we can capture, doing this recursively until we get down to the nth level. There are really two dimensions that we look at from a security perspective. One is identifying what we call inherent risk. So these are things obviously like vulnerabilities, but we also look at code quality. We look at contributor data, contributor behavior as other indicators of risk. We look at age, maintainability. So provide you with a complete inherent set of risks within all of the components in your supply chain. The other area of risk we look at, it's almost orthogonal. Attestation or integrity is identifying every component of software and understanding its source, where it came from, making sure that its source, basically where it came from, can be validated and verified as a good known source, and that the component you have actually matches what's in that good known source. This is a mechanism for us to detect potential tamper risks. One of the founders, Javed Hassan, our CEO, I've worked with him in a prior life, and I was working within a CISO organization. It was a fairly large organization. I owned AppSec, vulnerability management, cloud security, and red teaming and things of that nature, and had lived through several software supply chain incidents. And the one that pushed me over the edge was the Log4 shell or Log4j. And what was really troubling to me was the realization that we actually did not know what was in our software. This included internally built software as well as third-party vendor software, like they didn't even know. Based on this, I spent 6 months really researching and trying to understand. Obviously, I understood the secure software development practices. We had automated CI/CD pipelines, automated SaaS, DAST, SCA, etc. But this issue basically eluded all of those capabilities. Not that these capabilities are not important. I spent months really diving deep, talking to people I respected in the industry, trying to understand, how can this happen? Around the same time, Javed, who's one of the co-founders, reached out to me and said, hey, I'm working on this concept. What do you think? I said, I've been banging my head against the wall on this exact same issue. And I started collaborating with him on we need to think about it this way. My point of view and what I really bring to Lineage, I believe, is not just how do we solve this problem, how do we solve this in a way that practitioners that are dealing with this incredibly difficult set of challenges, how do we make it useful and impactful for them? So I spent weekends and nights working with this, even before the company was an actual company, on the concepts and the technology and how to bring it forward. And then finally joined Lineage after they convinced me that I should just be part of the team versus providing feedback.
Let's dive into the MVP for Lineage. And this will be interesting because there's the MVP, right, where you were talking to them nights and weekends on and advising them on the solution. But then there's also, what you might consider the MVP when you joined. I'll let you decide how you want to talk about both of those things, but tell me about the early versions of Lineage.
There are several approaches to security, but unless you actually know and identify what I call root cause of a situation, you're simply putting maybe guardrails around something, or you're trying to protect something, but you're not really solving the root problem. And what really drew me to Lineage was the approach of trying to solve the root problem. And in this case, the supply chain is, one, illuminating or identifying all of its components, and then identifying all of the risks, including the risk of a tamper, right, where something can be compromised. The MVP was really focused on this discovery, right, and understanding risk. And what I was able to contribute to that process is, okay, how do we present this to a practitioner so they understand it and can consume it? The real MVP beyond that, which was, I think, really making an impact in the industry, was after I joined, and we've had several conversations with key design partners, if you will, and customers, that it's all of this risk information is great, but it's only good if you can do something about it. And that's really when we started this journey. And I think the real MVP of the product was around remediations, right? We started with recommending remediations and how to reduce risk within the software.
This message is sponsored by SnapTrade. Link in user brokerage accounts and build world-class investing experiences with SnapTrade's unified brokerage API. With over $12 billion in connected assets and over 300,000 connected accounts, SnapTrade's API quality and developer experience are second to none. SnapTrade is SOC 2 certified and uses industry-leading security practices. Developers can use the company's official client SDKs to build investing experiences in minutes without the limitations of traditional aggregators. Get started for free today by visiting snaptrade.com/codestory. This episode is sponsored by Speakeasy. Whether you're growing the user adoption of your public API or streamlining internal development, SDKs can turn the chore of API integration into effortless implementation. Unburden your API users from guessing their way around your API while keeping your team focused on your product. Shorten the time to live integration and provide a delightful experience for your customers. With Speakeasy's platform, you can now automatically generate up-to-date, robust, idiomatic SDKs in 10 languages and Terraform providers in just a matter of minutes. SDKs are feature-rich with type safety, auto retries, and pagination. Everything you need to give your API the developer experience it deserves. Deliver a premium API experience without the premium price tag. Visit speakeasy.com/codestory to get started and generate your first SDK for free. You've got that MVP then centered around the recommendations, or you're starting there and you've got it to a point where you're getting some traction. Tell me about how you've progressed it, right? And maybe there's a little bit of progression between the MVP to the recommendations part, and then there's probably progression after that. I'm curious about how you build your roadmap. How do you go about deciding this is the next most important thing to build or to address with Lineage?
One dimension is the software internally built software? Is it a third-party vendor software? And so from a recommendations and remediation standpoint, the workflows are very different, right? And how do we enable that regardless if that's your own internal dev team or it's a third-party software vendor and you're interacting with them, so it's third-party risk management. We looked at it from that lens, built integrations to Jira, eventually created a platform for vendors to share their software bill of materials and collectively analyze the risks that we find and recommendations for remediation. So that was one lens. The second one was we started providing recommendations because the customer feedback was initially, well, this is great information, but I don't know what to do with it. But when we first created the recommendations, we then received feedback, hey, this is great, really well needed, but actually our developers are having a hard time implementing these things, right? So it's great you're giving me recommendations, but it's really difficult to actually implement these recommendations. So we started looking back at this and said, all right, what can we do here? And then what we realized that there are really different categories of recommendations. And we started categorizing one set of recommendations that we call the compatible plan. And what that means is we found that many updates to your software will break your software, right? Which causes a significant amount of pain for the organizations in terms of implementing those remediations. And so what we did is we created, okay, we're going to look at all of your vulnerabilities. And the second thing we did is in order to do this, we need to look at the full stack, right? We're not just looking at application code. We're looking at, let's say, your container OS, all your libraries, and understanding how all of these pieces fit together, understanding all of the vulnerabilities across these layers, and then understanding what combinations of changes will remediate that vulnerability. It may not necessarily be going to the latest, let's say, version of open source package A. It could be an older version that remediates, but is more compatible. So the first version is, okay, what are the quote unquote compatible changes that remediates the most risk, but will not break your software? That was number one. And we thought, wow, that's great. Now they can actually automate the implementation of the fixes without worrying about it breaking. What was left over was what we call these incompatible fixes that we think you should still do, but at least now you can plan for addressing those fixes. We identify where the conflicts are. We provide instructions in Jira, so now you can use a ticketing system to make sure the right teams get the right instructions and what to fix. You can plan it so it's no longer, oh, a developer made a change, you go to testing, it breaks your software, now you got to go back. You address that in the planning cycle from the very beginning. The third thing we noticed throughout remediations is, and this is specific to the open source world, supply chain for software is primarily open source, is we're finding about 52% actually have no fix available. There's not a fixed version for a variety of reasons. What we found is open source falls into three buckets. One is well-maintained, which is every 2-3 months there's an update, there's active community. There's a maintained, which is maybe not well-maintained, but it's being maintained. We're seeing an update at least. There was one update within the last 6 months to 12 months. And then we're seeing about 50% of open source, which is not maintained. There hasn't been an update in 2 years, and the likelihood of any updates coming is very low. From there, we said, hey, okay, we're starting to see where unmaintained software is a problem. And it's a problem because organizations actually can't fix it. They could be deep transitive issues. We decided to say, what if we could fix it? So we developed the capability, especially for unmaintained, because if things are being maintained, we want the ecosystem to drive it and work with the ecosystem to fix it. But if it's not maintained, we will fork branch it and contribute it back either to the community, if the community exists, to absorb it, or provide it through a private repo for our customers. So now they have a fixed version of that unfixed vulnerable open source component. And that's the evolution. This is where we are right now. And there's more to come. And I can tell you where we're looking toward.
Absolutely. We're going to dive into that in just a minute. As you talk about how it has, come about, team is incredibly important to make anything, as bold and industry changing as Lineage. So tell me about how you built that team. And I'm curious about what you look for at Lineage that, defines or determines that person is the winning horse to join you.
One is our CTO and also co-founder, Anand Rivashetty. He's got a wealth of experience in building cyber products and building teams and engineering teams. Even if they're developers working on the solution, do they really intrinsically understand this domain? And one of the things we found is that having a strong understanding of supply chain, of open source, DevSecOps, cloud-based solutions, infrastructure. Like, if you don't have a background or ability to understand and ramp up how all of this works, how organizations build modern software, deploy modern software, and all of the challenges within it, your contributions are going to be limited. The individuals will miss the understanding of a capability and why it's relevant, why it's important, and won't ask the right questions necessarily. Number two is this, I would call it having a thick skin, right? There's a lot of things that we do, we try, and a lot of it doesn't make it into the product, but you have to be willing to really analyze in multiple ways the data we're seeing, have a hypothesis, and try to make it happen, and realizing that a small percentage will actually bear fruit. And that's challenging, right? That takes a certain personality to want to go through that type of process. And the third is teamwork. Even though we're a small company, being able to communicate very effectively all the moving piece parts that we have going, and what's relevant, what's not relevant, and what's working, what's not working.
This episode is sponsored by Vanta. You're a startup founder. Finding product market fit is probably your number one priority. But to land bigger customers, you also need security compliance. And obtaining your SOC 2 or ISO 27001 certification can open those big doors. But they take time and energy, pulling you away from building and shipping. And that's where Vanta comes in. Vanta is the all-in-one compliance solution helping startups like yours get audit ready and build a strong security foundation quickly and painlessly. How, you ask? Vanta automates the manual security tasks that slow you down, helping you streamline your audit. And the platform connects you with trusted vCISOs to build your program, auditors to get you through audits quickly, and a marketplace for essentials like pen testing. Join over 8,000 companies, including many Y Combinator and Techstars startups who trust Vanta. Simplify compliance and get $1,000 off at vanta.com/codestory. That's VANTA.com/codestory. This message is sponsored by QA Wolf. If slow QA processes bottleneck your software engineering team and you're releasing slower because of it, you need a solution. You need QA Wolf. QA Wolf gets engineering teams to 80% automated end-to-end test coverage and helps them ship 5 times faster by reducing QA cycles from hours to minutes. With over 100 5-star reviews on G2 and customer testimonials from SalesLoft, Drata, AutoTrader, and many more, you're in good hands. Ready to ship faster with fewer bugs? Join the Wolf Pack at QAWolf.com to see if they can help you squash the QA bottleneck. This message is sponsored by SnapTrade. Link in user brokerage accounts and build world-class investing experiences with SnapTrade's unified brokerage API. With over $12 billion in connected assets and over 300,000 connected accounts, SnapTrade's API quality and developer experience are second to none. SnapTrade is SOC 2 certified and uses industry-leading security practices. Developers can use the company's official client SDKs to build investing experiences in minutes without the limitations of traditional aggregators. Get started for free today by visiting snaptrade.com/codestory. I'm curious about scalability for Lineage, and this is interesting as a solution and as a company based on the industry that you're supporting here. So tell me about scalability. Was Lineage built to scale from day one, or with scale in mind, architecture or org design, things like that? Or have there been interesting areas where you've had to fight it as you've grown?
We actually built and architected Lineage for scalability from day one. Part of the architecture was designed as a multi-tenant SaaS architecture with scalability in mind within its architecture. One of the interesting challenges that we ran into, we had built the architecture for public cloud consumption and expansion resources. Then we quickly realized the early adopters of a lot of our solutions are critical infrastructure companies as well as government and Department of Defense. They have strong restrictions and guardrails around cloud services, and many times have private cloud services. So the one adaptation we did have to make was to adapt to deploying in what I would call semi-private cloud infrastructures and environments, which are either air-gapped or contained for both, what I would call critical infrastructure like finance and utilities, but then also government and Department of Defense.
So as you step out on the balcony and you look across, all that you've built, all that's been built with Lineage, what are you most proud of?
What I'm most proud of is we attack the problem addressing the root cause versus simply providing features. We built the capability to detect actual threats and compromises in the supply chain through this integrity attestation, which I think is a significant contribution to the industry, number one. And then number two, we'll focus on, as I mentioned earlier, remediation. How do you solve these challenges? How do you make the software more secure from a supply chain perspective? Those would be the two aspects I think I'm most proud of, because they're both, I think, game changers and very much needed within the industry.
Let's flip the script a little bit. Tell me about a mistake you made and how you and your team responded to it.
I think I mentioned this earlier, right? I think our first mistake was focusing on only highlighting the risks. We believe so strongly that understanding the supply chain, understanding the risks in software were not being adequately addressed, and that by itself would be a tremendous contribution to the industry. And what we very quickly realized is that the industry is really overwhelmed. So they have many detecting risk from a variety of sources, and then making decisions off of this is becoming almost paralyzing. And so I think the mistake we made was focusing only on identifying risk. And so how we pivoted based on that feedback from our customers is several things. One is we actually integrate with whatever tools you have already and have a dashboard to summarize everything so you can start making decisions on how to address the risks. So I think that was our key mistake going into it, thinking if we can do such an amazing job in identifying all the risks, that would be useful. And I think it's useful, but it's not pragmatic, and it ran into other issues from our customers.
Okay, let's move forward then. So tell me what the future looks like for Lineage, the product, and for the company.
What the future that we're focusing on, and we'll be making some announcements here shortly, as we look at the challenges with building software and the software supply chain, the world today, the way it exists, is developers go grab open source and other components, they build the software, you scan it, you identify all of these risks, or a new vulnerability pops up. They've got to go back and patch it, remediate it, or provide compensating controls, etc. All of that is good. And then there's a tremendous focus now, because of this overwhelming amount of vulnerabilities that development teams and security teams have to deal with. There's been a strong focus on prioritization. What are the things you're not going to do, and how do you do that so you can focus on the things you must do? But in essence, it's what are you not going to do? And obviously, we've provided these recommendations that make it easier, from how to fix those remediations. We've also are forking and branching and fixing code that have no fix in the open source realm. Really, where we're headed is, what if your developers grab open source, which is predominantly most of the supply chain, from Lineage, let's call it gold source, with a 99.5% guarantee that it is vulnerability free, at least critical and high vulnerability free, and that 0.5% that is not part of Lineage gold source, we will go fix it and provide it to you. Or if you can't use a clean version, you need to modify a version that is vulnerable, we'll do that also. So that ultimate goal is, let's get out of this cycle of scanning, patching, breaking, fixing, and doing this continuously, to why can't we just solve this for everybody from the beginning? And the answer is we can. And it takes a tremendous amount of resources and a lot of technology, but that's really where we're going. So imagine like a CIO or a CISO where you're sourcing all your software that's vulnerability free. And there's a very small percentage you will have to deal with. And oh, by the way, we'll deal with that for you as well. So that's where we're going, which we think is going to be extremely disruptive in the industry.
Okay, Nick, let's switch to you. Who influences the way that you work? Name a person or many persons or something you look up to and why.
I've had several amazing mentors. I also look to some of what I would call great thinkers out there in the field. There's quite a few notable thinkers in the software supply chain space, but more importantly in the cyberspace. And what influences me in my direction is looking at things not only in depth, but across from a full breadth perspective. So one depth is when do we understand the problem to its fullest depth and the root cause, number one, and how do we get there and how do we solve for it? And then breadth, that's great, but then how can this be applied in a way and consumed easily by the industry and whomever we're trying to help? And both of those, for me, I look to some of my past mentors that I've worked with, and they've been amazing mentors. And then I also look to organizational dynamics and how do we help influence individuals so that they understand and can adopt these solutions. Because you can have the greatest solution out there, but if you can't communicate it effectively and you can't articulate it in a way that's meaningful, that doesn't do anybody any good.
Okay, Nick, last question. So you're getting on a plane and you're sitting next to a young entrepreneur who's built the next big thing. They're jazzed about it. They can't wait to show it off to the world, and they can't wait to show it off to you right there on the plane. What advice do you give that person, having gone down this road with Lineage?
Really understand who is the ultimate benefactor, buyer, if you will, of the capability. There are so many great innovations out there, but lack clarity of what is the exact either business problem or benefit. And until you reach that clarity, it's really difficult, right? You're going to have a lot of people tell you, hey, this is awesome, but not get a lot of traction, right? And I think it's really key to start being laser focused, especially early on who that is. And then once you have that, then expand, if you will, laterally, right, to other areas. But I think it's important to really prove it out in one segment, in one area, and then broaden it from there.
Well, that's great advice. Well, Nick, thank you for being on the show today, and thanks for telling the creation story of Lineage.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And this concludes another chapter of Code Story. Code Story is hosted and produced by Noah Labhart. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcasting app of your choice. And when you get a chance, leave us a review. Both things help us out tremendously. And thanks again for listening.